So it's been a little while since we've checked in with our English cousins. Our royalist compadres. And it's Remembrance Sunday today, where we wear little poppy badges and remember the dead from the 2 world wars. And it was also the day of a Free Palestine march in London, which I think had about a third of a million people, 300,000 marchers, pro-Palestine demonstrators, marching from Hyde Park all the way down to US Embassy. Not Remembrance Sunday, it's 11th of November, though. It's that day. Leave me alone. Didn't they have the silence today, though? Whatever. Leave me alone. Yeah, they went past this. The cenotaph was over there in Parliament Square. And Suella Braverman, who is a Conservative MP. Oh, it's Armistice Day. Gotcha. All right. I don't know my British war holidays. They're all dumb. All right. Suella Braverman, the one who talks about how it's her dream to send migrants on planes to Rwanda. That kind of shit. She's one of the more psychotic authoritarian conservatives in government. It's weird that they often give, I don't know if it's just like that's her authentic opinions or that the conservatives are just very good because they are very effective in letting their craziest positions become embodied by like brown women. Because before Suella, it was Priti Patel. If they're doing that strategically, it's very clever, but who knows? Maybe it's just a coincidence. So they had this march, and Suella, who is a big champion of the anti-protest laws that we've been passing in the UK, was very, very interested in cancelling this march. She basically couldn't because they weren't doing anything illegal. So it took place. But I think she had said like quite inflammatory stuff about the marchers. She said that they were hate marchers. She said they were Islamists. She said that "From the River to the Sea" slogan was too controversial to have like said publicly. I think there's a lot of warnings that she made about these protests. And looking at the Free Palestine protests that have happened around the world since October 7th, there's definitely room for criticism. There was that one in Sydney where they were chanting like "Gas the Jews." There was that one in America where the guy was bragging about hipsters or hippies getting killed by paragliders.
When the Palestinians broke through the fence, they put the F-35s on trailers. And as you might have seen, there was some sort of rave or desert party where they were having a great time until the resistance came in electrified hang gliders and took at least several dozen hipsters. But I'm sure they're doing very fine despite what the New York Post says.
There have been lots of people with these signs that glorify the paragliders. I guess a lot of them just didn't know what those paragliders were doing, or they did know and they didn't care. It could be either. And there's obviously been a massive surge in anti-Semitic hate crimes up and down Europe. We've had like France, where people have had where an old Jewish couple had their door Molotov cocktailed, or there was like Stars of David drawn on people's houses. So yeah, it's pretty wild. I think it's good as a protester to police your protesters, to police other people at the protest. If someone is holding up a ridiculous, like a hateful sign, or if someone is chanting, like calling for death and shit like that, it gets really uncomfortable where a crowd of British people, because British people never like to disturb the vibe, okay? That's why we stand in queues. That's why we say sorry for everything. That's why we say please and thank you too often. That's why, yeah, we're a very polite nation. And the result of that is that people can say mad shit at protests, and people just kind of like awkwardly cheer and clap along, and no one really knows what to do. No one really likes to be the one to disturb the rhythm. And it's like like I've been at a protest where someone was chanting like the only good turf is a dead turf, and I'm like, and I was surrounded by a bunch of like 5'2" HRT pink hair like people with fluffy rainbow tote bags. I'm like, bro, what are you? If anyone's gonna get attacked, it's gonna be the people in this protest, right? If you're talking like, yeah, I don't know, I just thought it was a bad idea, but no one, people just kind of cheered, and you could tell there's a little bit of, ooh, I don't know about that one, bro. Yeah, it was just so. Yeah, I don't really. I think it's good to police protest because I think generally most people, once you call something out in a protest, and I've seen this happen plenty of times, is that generally other people will agree if it's very much within reason, and then they'll back off or they'll take down their sign that has some like liberal Scottish politician with a Hitler mustache drawn on him or whatever the fuck. Yeah. Um, there are, but there are lots of things that happen at these protests that are very obvious to call out. From the river to the sea, I think is quite low on that list. I would say that from the river to the sea is like, I can see why people are jittery about it because people like Hamas say it and supporters of Hamas say it. And when they say it, they mean free all of historic Palestine from all the Jews. That's what they mean. Or if you're a more secular extremist, you might say it means free Palestine from all the colonizers who all happen to be Jews. Or, well, I think imagine most people think about it, is uh, they think from the river to the sea means that one day Israelis and Palestinians will share the land peacefully and there will be reconciliation and there will be reparations and they'll all exist harmoniously in a binational, secular, democratic state. I feel like that's probably what, if you pushed people who were saying from river to the sea, that's probably what most of them would say, at least in the like English speaking world or in like Europe and America. Um, so I don't like this idea that when people say one state solution, for example, is like genocidal. Like that's the Ben Shapiro like take. I don't buy that at all because at the end of the day, outside of an invasion, the only way one state happens is if both sides agree to it. And both sides are not going to agree to it if they think their side's going to not be protected and have reasonable assurances made for them in that process. So, yeah, there's definitely a debate you can have about using that phrase because with any other thing that we do, we tend to say like, oh, if a sentence in and of itself might not be bad, it might be completely inoffensive, but if it's co-opted by enough racists and anti-Semites, then that's a problem, right? So you could probably have that debate about Rift to the Sea, but that's not the again also free speech at the end of the day. Like it's not enough to try and cancel a march over or to say that like so yeah there was no even with the UK's laws there was no canceling this march, but because Suella framed it in this way and said that it was hate marchers or Islamists, it did bring out a group of counter protesters featuring one of them, an old friend of the show who we haven't heard about for quite a while, Tommy Robinson. And like a classic British patriot, they don't give a fuck about British patriotism, not even slightly. Supporters of the activist Tommy Robinson and football hooligans broke through police lines in Whitehall, central London, just moments before the 2-minute silence at 11 a.m. These guys, these defenders of Britain, these respecters of British customs, these guys who will say you can exist in our country, just do all the British stuff properly. It's like okay. The march was scheduled for 12, so they were scheduled to march after the 2-minute silence. So we've got our British Muslims out here being more sensitive to British customs than old Tommy Globinson. Let's see how this went. I think that's why they inferred that they are football hooligans with those chants. By contrast, I think the Free Palestine March of 300,000 people was actually peaceful at the end of the day. I think. I think there were maybe 5 allegations of hate crimes, no reported arrests by 5 p.m. 5 allegations of hate crimes, including anti-Semitic and racist chants and placards. So it was there. There was definitely some, can't be perfect. Can't probably be room for improvement, but damn. No, stop reading 800. Look here. More than 300,000 pro-Palestinian demonstrators gathered, although organizers put the number at 800,000. People like to inflate their numbers, okay? And like progressives are not immune to this, right? It's like wrestling. You know, in wrestling, like all the heights and weights are fake. Or maybe they're gathered from one time, but they're never constant. And you know, like all the attendance records that they send at like WrestleMania, it's like all those numbers are fake. I guess same here. You know, people lie about their numbers. I think it was closer to 300,000 from everything I've read. But damn. As far as I've heard from the British protests, I don't think I've heard of anything that bad. I know, well, I do know that outside of the protests, since October 7th, there's been like a really big rise in Islamophobic and anti-Semitic hate crimes. Let me see. Hate crime rise UK 2023. This is the 20th of October. 1,300% rise. You never see a percentage number that high, eh? Islamophobic offenses up by 140%. I think the UK isn't the UK one of the more unique countries, because most countries, Jews are the biggest recipients of hate crimes. Like I think in America it's Jews, but I think in the UK it's Muslims and then Jews. Hmm. Is that because their numbers are bigger though? No, I think it's proportionate. Like whatever I read, but that was a while ago. Islamophobic hate crimes are maxed out already. Listen, there's always room for more, Vivian. You can always make the number go higher, eh? Never give up. I'm joking. Obviously, it's bad that the number goes up, but okay. There are very few Jews in the UK. Yeah, I know. I think in Scotland, there are only like a few thousand. And we know there are none in Doncaster because of the Great Doncaster Jewish Purge. 2011, there were 5,800 Jews in Scotland. I guess some of them went to Israel, did they? Or I don't know. Some of them left anyway. Not many of them. 41% of them live in East Renfrewshire in Greater Glasgow. Huh. Huh. To be fair, I don't know that many Jews. I know like a couple, like 2, 3. There's a whole history of anti-Semitism in the UK. It's like a lot of people in the UK don't know about it. I don't think a lot of people in the UK know dick about the anti-Semitism. Like, I can tell you what I know just off of like a bit of reading. But we've had like quite a few anti-Semitic purges, and it basically culminates in like a couple of 100 years of hatred, and then there's like a huge expulsion, and then they're banned from the country for like a few hundred years. So I think a lot of Jews came to the UK with William the Conqueror in 1066. They were locked out of a lot of the artisan work, like craft and arts, because those were like monopolized by Christian guilds. But they had one exception that they were allowed to engage in that Christians were not, which was lending money for profit. They were allowed to do usury. The king would take advantage of Jewish lenders, and you would have like a local Jew who could basically, I can't know exactly how it worked, but they would lend, and then the king would appropriate taxes from the local Jews. So I think in one of the battles in Scotland, actually, in the Scottish War of Independence, in between like William Wallace and Robert the Bruce, there was one time I think when the Scottish kicked out the English, and they like, and this mob just basically murdered the local Jew because he was kind of like seen as an extortionate lender, like a fucking moneybags person. Um, and on top of that, you had like blood libel cases. So Jews were accused of killing babies to harvest their blood for religious rituals. There were riots. I think in York there was a riot where like 100 Jews were killed, just in one go. And it's also the case that people think that a lot of these things are a lot newer than they actually are. In the 13th century, I think it was one of the King Henrys, 3 or 4, he made it law that Jews had to wear badges, like marking badges. And that was a practice that I think the first people to ever do that were way back in like Baghdad. I think it was Baghdad in like the 9th or 10th century when people started doing that with like, it was like they had to wear these like cone hats or stars. But yeah, they did that in England in the 13th century. And then they were forbidden from building new synagogues. Then there was like segregation laws. And then what would also happen throughout the 1200s when there was a lot of fighting, often between Scots and English or between different barons and lords, is they would borrow a lot of money from Jews. They would utilize Jewish debts to fund their wars, and then after, when they didn't want to pay the Jews back, they would like incite a pogrom or just kill them or expel them. So that happened quite a lot as well. So anti-Jewish rising was really common in like the 13th century, and then towards the end of the century, you have these like new statutes come in where public hatred of Jewish like lending was just too unsustainable. So they outlawed it. They outlawed usury, and then but with Jews being locked out of everything else, a lot of them just violated the statute and tried to lend anyway because they couldn't do anything else. And that made people angry. So there were like synagogues started getting closed, and then finally, in like I think just before the end of the 13th century, Edward the First, who was Hammer of the Scots, was also Hammer of the Jews. He was massively in debt from fighting Scots, and instead of paying it back, he just threw out I think he owed some of it to Jews, so he just expelled them, and that was them. They were all fucked off and banned, and they wouldn't come back to the UK until like 1450 or 1600s, mid 1600s. They wouldn't, so they were banned for like 400 years, or just a bit under. It was when Oliver Cromwell and the Roundheads took control that the Jew ban was lifted. So yeah, that's just one of, I think, probably more than one anti-Semitic purges in the UK. Yeah, the Roundheads. Yeah. No, do you learn much about Scottish history? No, not really. Learn about the War of Independence from a very pro-Scottish perspective. We never actually learned about the Purge of the Jews, though. That was something I had to figure out by myself, thanks to the old Wikipedia and other such reputable sources. But anyway, hope you learned something there about the Jews. A bit of a tangent. Suella Braverman's a fucking moron. God, what a horrible person. I cannot, again, no fan of Starmer, but God. No fan of Starmer, but I just can't wait to get these absolute scumbags out of government. Like, it's, hey, look at them go.
Loner box, you smarmy cuck
bastard. Look at that, 21 points. It's so consistent as well. Anyway.